You're listening to the audiobook for Elvis and the Beatles, Love and Rivalry Between the Two Biggest Acts of the 20th Century, by Trina Young. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved. Chapter 1, A Boy from Tupelo. Quote, "From the time I was a kid, I knew something was going to happen to me. I didn't know exactly what, but it was a feeling that the future looked kinda bright," unquote. Elvis Presley. To be crowned the king of rock and roll, someone who influenced a generation of musicians, most notably the Beatles, there had to be a reason it was Elvis Presley. Some of the breaks Elvis got when he was starting out may have happened by chance or even luck, but as they say, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Elvis did not necessarily prepare to be a rock and roll star. In fact, it was not even close to what he wanted to become. However, Elvis had the innate confidence and desire to be different and to succeed, two crucial attributes needed to be the leader of a musical revolution. Quote, "The first thing Elvis had to learn to transcend, after all, was the failure and obscurity he was born to," observed music critic Greil Marcus. He had to find some way to set himself apart, to escape the limits that could well have given his story a very different ending, unquote. It all started with a dream. When Elvis received his award as one of the 10 outstanding young men of America from the U.S. Junior Chamber of Commerce in January 1971, he revealed his childhood hopes and desires. Quote, "When I was a child, ladies and gentlemen, I was a dreamer. I read comic books and I was the hero of the comic book. I saw movies and I was the hero in the movie. So every dream that I ever dreamed has come true 100 times, unquote." Elvis Presley was the ultimate American rags-to-riches story. He grew up in poverty in Tupelo, Mississippi. He was born in 1935 in a two-room house built by his father, grandfather, and uncle. The house had no indoor bathroom and no running water. The family found solace in music to escape their financial struggles. Quote, "Since I was 2 years old, all I knew was gospel music," Elvis recalled. "That music became such a part of my life it was as natural as dancing. A way to escape from the problems. And my way of release," unquote. Friends and family saw the ambition and drive in Elvis at a young age. Even during his preteen years at Lawton Elementary School, Elvis had the ambition of growing up to be a singer like Mississippi Slim, who had a local radio show on Tupelo's WELO during the late 1940s. Magdalene Morgan, Elvis's childhood girlfriend from age 11 to 13, said that Elvis used to bring his guitar to school and go outside at lunchtime and sing to whoever would listen. Elvis, quote, "always wanted to be a singer. Always," she exclaimed. That was his greatest ambition, to be a singer, unquote. Elvis sang for the first time in public at the age of 10. Presley's fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. J.C. Oleta Grimes, was so impressed when she heard Elvis sing at the morning prayer program at Lawton that she persuaded the principal to enter Elvis in his first talent competition. In 1945, Elvis won 5th place in the annual Mississippi-Alabama Fair and Dairy Show at the Tupelo Fairgrounds singing "Old Shep" with no musical accompaniment. That led to Elvis's mother, Gladys, buying him his first guitar a few months later at the Tupelo hardware store. Presley then got help with guitar lessons from his local pastor, Frank Smith. He even got to perform a few times on Mississippi Slim's radio show. Quote, "I don't regard money or position as important," Elvis explained in a 1965 interview. "But I can never forget the longing to be someone. I guess if you are poor, you always think bigger and want more than those who have everything when they are born," unquote. Elvis and his family moved to Memphis on November 6, 1948. There, Presley entered Humes Junior High School as an 8th grader and would attend for the next 5 years, graduating from Humes High School on June 3, 1953. Elvis always sat in the back row of his classes. However, despite being extremely shy, Elvis was an active participant in speech class. During his first year at Humes, Elvis was a volunteer library worker. Elvis also joined the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, JROTC, when he was 16. Presley had his own high school Rat Pack, which included Farley Guy, Paul Dower, and Buzzy Forbes. Elvis made friends with the boys when he and his parents moved to the public housing apartments, Lauderdale Courts, on Winchester Avenue in Memphis in October 1949. During high school, Elvis stood out from the rest. He grew his hair and sideburns long and dressed differently than the rest of his peers. Quote, Elvis was kind of a loud dresser, observed Dower. He wore those loud clothes and he had that slick hair, and a lot of students and even people not at Hume's didn't like him because of it. That's just the way he was. He was about as strange to them then as hippies were in the 60s, unquote. Even though he had no money to spend on clothes, Elvis was very resourceful in coming up with flashy outfits. According to Ronnie Trout, a classmate at Hume's High, Elvis would go with his mother and grandmother to the Poplar Street Mission to listen to the preaching and gospel music. The people who ran the mission would let Elvis look through the boxes of clothes there that were donated. That is where Elvis would find dress pants and sport coats that he liked to put together as outfits. Elvis, quote, would wear dress pants or a shirt open at the collar to school, recalled Trout. He would take a scarf and kinda fashion it like an ascot, tie it like a movie producer. Then he'd wear a sport coat, like a one-button coat that looked kinda like a zoot suit, unquote. Compared to most of his male peers who were wearing t-shirts and jeans, Presley really stood out from the crowd. The legend of Presley's flamboyant style lives on with the historic landmark plaque that now stands in front of the former Hume's High School building in Memphis. The plaque, which was dedicated in 2013, says about Elvis, quote, his slick-backed hair and unusual style of dress were tolerated by Principal Thomas C. Brindley, unquote. In high school, when he heard his friends telling jokes about Liberace, Elvis said, man, if I could ever get people to talk about me the way they talk about Liberace, I would really have it made. Presley's dreams of being an entertainer were starting to play out in his everyday life. On occasion, he'd go down to Ellis Auditorium in Memphis and work the concessions during various shows, as many Hume's High School students would do for extra money. Guy Coffey, who was in charge of concessions, recalled how he would hire Elvis to work for the gospel shows and wrestling matches. Quote, his ambition, he would tell me, was to play on that stage at Ellis Auditorium someday. Sometimes, after the night's event had ended, Elvis would go up on the stage and play to imaginary crowds, bowing to their applause. I would have to tell him, come on now, Elvis, we have to close the place up, unquote. During high school, Elvis was known to carry his guitar around at school. Some of the kids would roll their eyes when they saw Elvis coming, since in the early 1950s, many teenagers were coming out of the big band era and weren't fans of hillbilly music, according to classmate Billy Childs Turner. But all this criticism, if he ever heard it, didn't seem to bother Elvis, says Turner. He was very self-satisfied, like, I am who I am. She described Elvis as an egotistical introvert, meaning he was confident in himself, in his abilities, but he pretty much stayed to himself. This was also the time when Elvis discovered Lansky Brothers clothing store. He first worked at Lowe's State Theater on Main Street in downtown Memphis in September 1950. He then had a few other jobs and returned to Lowe's as an usher in April 1952, but was fired after 5 weeks. During this time, Elvis wandered over to Lansky Brothers, which was just around the corner from the theater. In the spring of 1952, owner Bernard Lansky saw Elvis peering into the window. He invited Elvis in the shop to look around. Elvis replied, I ain't got nothing. But when I do, when I save up some money, I'm gonna come in here and buy you out. Lansky replied, hey, do me a favor, don't buy me out. Just buy from me. So, when Elvis started becoming successful, he had Lansky supply his outfits for live appearances on the Louisiana Hayride, the Dorsey Brothers stage show and the Ed Sullivan Show. But his stylish dressing wasn't just for the stage. When Elvis took his girlfriend, Dixie Locke, to her junior prom in May 1955, he had Lansky's tailor him a pink jacket, black pants, and pink and black cummerbund. The relationship between Elvis and Lansky Brothers lasted throughout Presley's career. Quote, I never saw anyone so crazy over clothes, said Bernard Lansky. Not being afraid to be different or express himself through his clothing and hair, quote, clothes say things about you that you can't. Sometimes, Elvis would later say, Elvis was on a mission to become a professional singer, and he saw his path to that goal at Sun Studio on Union Avenue in Memphis. Presley first entered Sun Studio in July 1953, a month after graduating from high school. He paid $3.98 to record two ballads, My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. Elvis claimed the two-sided record was a birthday gift for his mother, Gladys. However, his deeper motivations were clear. He said to Marion Keisker, Sam Phillips' secretary, "If you know anyone that needs a singer." In January 1954, Elvis returned to Sun and paid to record two more ballads, I'll Never Stand in Your Way, and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. Over the next 6 months, Elvis would drop by Sun on several occasions, chatting with Marion and asking if she knew of any bands needing a singer. While Sam Phillips gets all the credit for discovering Elvis, it was actually Marion who was his biggest supporter at the beginning. Quote, there is no doubt that it was Keisker who gave Elvis hope, who would talk with him about his dreams, and most likely kept reminding Sam about the kid with the sideburns, said Elvis historian, Ernst Jorgensen. Quote, Elvis was a very strong-willed person, Elvis's teenage friend, Luther Null recalls. His real ambition was steered by compassion and caring, not by fame and fortune. He said his dream then was to fix it so they, his parents, would never have to work again, unquote. Finally, on June 26, 1954, Elvis got the call he'd been waiting for. Sam Phillips was looking for a singer to record a new ballad from a demo that he had received called Without You. He asked Elvis to come in and give it a try, but the recording session with Presley didn't produce the results Phillips wanted. However, Sam still had hope for Elvis. He asked guitarist Scotty Moore to meet with Elvis and offer up his opinion. Moore had been working with Phillips with his own band, the Starlight Wranglers, which included bassist Bill Black. On July 4, 1954, Scotty invited Elvis over to his house so that he and Bill Black could give Presley an informal audition on behalf of Sun Records. Elvis showed up wearing a black shirt, pink pants with a black stripe, and white shoes. If Elvis's outfit didn't catch them off guard, then there was his first name, which Moore thought sounded like something out of science fiction. Scotty and Bill were not overly impressed with Elvis, who sang a bunch of pop songs and spirituals for them. He was extremely shy, but they both concluded to Sam Phillips that he had a good singing voice. As a result, Phillips asked Elvis to come in the next day, with Scotty and Bill as musical backup, to give Elvis another shot in the recording studio. It was on that day, July 5, 1954, that Elvis Presley's life would change forever. Through sheer persistence, Elvis Presley, being his own advocate, had made something happen. He, quote, took his dreams far more seriously than most ever dare, and he had the nerve to chase them down, summarized author Greil Marcus. When 19-year-old Elvis Presley set foot in Sun Studio in Memphis to audition for record producer Sam Phillips, his goal was not to be a rock and roll singer. Presley's intention during this first set of recording sessions was to sing ballads like one of his musical heroes, Dean Martin. The first song Elvis sang for Phillips at that session was a slow ballad, Harbor Lights, a pop standard previously recorded by artists like Bing Crosby and the Guy Lombardo Orchestra. However, as Elvis described later, when the ballads weren't working during that initial session, he, along with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, quote, just stumbled upon it, the sound, unquote. What they stumbled onto was something more upbeat and exciting than ballads, rock and roll. During a break at the July 5, 1954 recording session, Elvis started fooling around on his guitar, letting out some nervous energy, singing That's All Right by blues singer Arthur Crudup. When Phillips overheard this, he told Elvis to sing it again and, as a result, Presley's rock and roll career was launched. With the success of Presley's first single, That's All Right, you literally could say that the rock and roll revolution started by accident. As Scotty Moore told Memphis DJ George Klein in 2010, quote, I'd never heard it, Bill had never heard it. Sam jumped up, came around the front door and said, hey, get back on the mics. Let me hear some more of that. Bill got up on his bass, we looked at each other, what key was he in? Sam turned the mics on, and we ran through it a couple of times, you do this, do that, whatever. And I got a take on it in a very short period of time, 15 to 20 minutes probably, and that was it, unquote. Even Presley's relatives were shocked and they heard "That's All Right" for the first time on the radio. Quote, I was confused because in high school Elvis, just did basic singing, Presley's cousin Billy Smith said. But Elvis just turned loose on "That's All Right, Mama." It was just so upbeat and different from what few songs he sang around the family that I thought they were playing the wrong record, unquote. At the time, rock and roll was just starting to be recognized as a new genre of music. This unique mixture of pop, country, gospel and rhythm and blues wasn't even labeled rock and roll until the early 1950s when disc jockey Alan Freed popularized the term on his radio show first in Cleveland and then in New York. I never sang like that in my life, until I made that first record, Elvis said. I remembered that song because I heard Arthur sing it, and I thought I would like to try it. That was it. Scotty Moore recalls how quickly Elvis's first single took off, quote, within the space of 4 days, Elvis, Bill and I had recorded "That's All Right, Mama." Dewey Phillips had played it on the radio, creating a stampede to the stores, which placed orders for more than 5,000 records, and Sam had slapped a recording contract down in front of Elvis, unquote. While the success of "That's All Right," officially released on July 19, quickly turned Elvis into a local star in Memphis, his rise to national fame was by no means as an overnight success. Elvis paid his dues performing with his band, guitarist Scotty Moore, bassist Bill Black and later drummer DJ Fontana, in cities all over the South during the 18 months from mid-1954 through the end of 1955. As an artist for Sun Records, Presley had moderate regional success with "That's All Right," and later hit #1 on the country charts with "I Forgot to Remember to Forget." Presley became well known in the South, not as a rock and roll artist, but as a country/rockabilly artist. One of his early nicknames was the Hillbilly Cat. Elvis did not sign officially with Colonel Tom Parker as his manager until November 1955. Until then, Elvis had a few different managers including Scotty Moore and Bob Neal. Even in those early days, regardless of who his manager was, Presley's ambition was evident. Quote, he talked not in terms of being a moderate success, his ambition was to be big in movies and so forth, recalled Bob Neal, as told to his wife by Elvis. From the very first he had great ambitions to be nothing in the ordinary, but just to go all the way with it, unquote. In those early days, Elvis did a lot of promotion himself. Once he had a taste of success, he would do anything to help keep it going. In the Shreveport area, Presley went to a local printing shop to get posters made to help promote some of his shows in early 1955. In the spring of 1955, Elvis would spend hours signing autographs for his fans at a local record shop in Midland, Texas. According to Shirley McDade, a local 17-year-old that Elvis started dating, Presley even used to autograph dozens of white bow ties that he would throw into the audience during his shows. We would go purchase the bow ties and then sign them, recalled Shirley McDade, and then when he performed that evening, he would throw them to the girls that were screaming and climbing up on the stage. Friend Buddy Forbes later observed that Colonel Parker, quote, takes too much credit for making Elvis. Elvis was no dummy. He had gotten himself started. He used his head during the Sun days. He promoted himself. There was no way in the world you were going to stop him after that first record came out. No way, unquote. Elvis immediately started performing in public as his first single became an overnight hit in Memphis. On July 30, 1954, while Elvis, Scotty and Bill were performing at the Overton Park Shell in Memphis opening for country star Slim Whitman, something startling occurred. Quote, because he was wearing baggy pants that were pleated in the front, his attempt to keep time with the music created a wild gyrating effect with his pants legs, observed Scotty Moore. We didn't know what was going on when all those people started screaming and hollering, unquote. Elvis had no idea that his involuntary movements were causing such excitement with the crowd. His body was just responding naturally to the music. My manager told me to get back out there and do what I've been doing, Elvis recalled in 1956, and I said, what have I been doing? And he said, you've been shaking all over, your legs have been shaking with the music and your eyes twitching and your shoulders twitching and everything. get out there and keep doing it, unquote. He would study his audience. Tillman Franks, a talent manager who helped get Elvis on the Louisiana Hayride, explained. He would do something that would catch on and he would do a little more of it, like a mastermind. He would mastermind what the people would like to entertain them. He would learn things so fast. He was a genius, unquote. While Scotty Moore had a subdued persona on stage, it was bassist Bill Black who added to Presley's stage show. When standing on stage behind Elvis with his upright bass, Black would wave his hands around or shake his leg, trying to get the audience to laugh. Bill Black was a big part of Elvis's show, observed Porter Wagoner, country star who toured with Elvis in the early days. He got as much applause as Elvis did because he done this mimicking thing. Elvis would shake his leg and then Bill would just go crazy and shake his leg, ass, and everything else, really wild. People just loved it, unquote. Elvis's style wasn't conscious, said Scotty Moore. The tempo of the music gave it the feel. Bill Black loosened the audience up with humor, which allowed Elvis to come out and grab them, unquote. After being rejected as a one-time-only performer on the most prestigious country music radio show, the Grand Ole Opry, in October 1954, Elvis became a regular performer on the Louisiana Hayride. He toured relentlessly with Scotty, Bill and DJ, performing in the southern states, most often in Texas and Florida. He quickly built a following of fans throughout the South and, in March 1955, Elvis earned enough money to buy his first pink Cadillac. During the summer of 1955, Mae Axton, who did publicity for Colonel Parker's tours of country music artists in Florida, would see Elvis perform for the first time in Jacksonville. Later that year, Axton would co-write Presley's first #1 record, Heartbreak Hotel. Axton observed that Presley's concerts in 1955 had an immediate effect on teenagers, where a syndrome of falling in love with this new artist occurred. She recounts that her sons Hoyt and Johnny were immediately sold on Elvis after that Jacksonville show. They, quote, explained the charisma, so different, and yet so impelling, that was a part of Elvis. I knew after talking to them that this Elvis Presley was a sure shot for fame. It was just that the time had arrived for such a different personality as Elvis Presley to fulfill the restlessness that had begun its upsurge in the hearts of teenage America, unquote. Elvis realized the power that rock and roll music had on teenagers. Teenagers, quote, have some money now and they're buying the records, Elvis explained to country singer Wanda Jackson. They're the ones calling the radio stations requesting songs, and they can make or break you. You need to aim your songs at that audience if you want to sell a lot of records, unquote. Presley encouraged Jackson, who toured with him in 1955, to make the switch to rock and roll. Elvis told her, quote, if you want to be successful, I feel like you should do this music, unquote. We didn't look at ourselves as rebelling or rebels, or that our music was out of hell, like they were saying, Wanda Jackson recalled. But the kids liked it so much, and that was the first time that young people were like in the face of these adults saying, hey, you've got all the music, we want our own, so it was a rebellion in a sense, in that respect, unquote. In June 1955, Elvis was voted the most promising male vocalist of 1955 by the readers of Cashbox magazine. Sun Records officially released a total of 5 Elvis Presley singles, 10 songs, between July 1954 and August 1955. The success of these records set the stage for Presley's move to RCA Records in November 1955. While Sam Phillips was hesitant to sell Presley's record contract, he finally agreed, mainly because he was having major financial problems at his company. According to author Peter Guralnick, Sam, quote, had artists he couldn't promote, records he couldn't release, all because of an absence of cash. Sam had from the very start of Elvis's success been determined that Sun Records was not going to become known as a one-artist label, continued Guralnick. More to the point, he was equally determined to prove that Elvis Presley was not a fluke, that there was a wealth of talent out there just waiting to be discovered, unquote. It was the end of an era in Elvis's career when his Sun Records contract was sold to RCA in November 1955 for $40,000. But there was no doubt that those 5 Sun singles recorded by Elvis would be regarded as some of the most influential recordings in Elvis's career for many of his followers. Quote, "The early Elvis records live on without Elvis being a beautiful male animal who swung his pelvis," John Lennon remarked in 1980. "I didn't see him. I heard the music first. Afterwards, I saw that it did come in a package. But you don't need the package. With Elvis, the basic thing, the basic energy, is on the records," unquote. Unknowingly, Presley, with the help of Sam Phillips, had not only started a revolution of music, but as Bruce Springsteen describes, Elvis was, quote, "the precursor of the sexual revolution, of the civil rights revolution. A new way of being, a new way of looking, a new way of thinking about sex, about race, about identity, about life." Once Elvis came across the airwaves, once he was heard and seen in action, you could not put the genie back in the bottle, unquote.